the most important thing that we can do is give predictability. Let the American public know that this is important, that we want to pass this, but we want to make it permanent in every case that makes sense and where we can. When Americans go to think about starting a business, when they go to think about planning for their future or their kids' future, they know and have certainty of the tax code that they can say, this is what I need to do because I know now it's not 3 or 4 years, it's 10 plus years that I'm going to have this provision that I can plan. I hope that answers your question. The risk of not doing it could be fatal to our economy because the tax rates will go back up drastically. Individual rates, corporate rates, the provisions that help us innovate, the R&D side of it that I mentioned, it could really be a fatal blow to our economy. And
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm the host, David Fromm. 1973 was an interesting year. The U.S. backed Israel in the Yom Kippur War, which didn't sit well with OPEC, leading to an oil embargo, fuel shortages, and long lines at gas stations. Meanwhile, the U.S. officially ended its involvement in the Vietnam War. NASA launched Skylab, and the legendary Battle of the Sexes tennis match between Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs made history. But as big as those moments were, something else happened that may not have grabbed headlines at the time, but it's had a lasting impact. The Republican Study Committee, or RSC, was created, and it has been the conservative backbone of the House Republicans in Congress ever since. The committee is the largest caucus of conservatives on Capitol Hill and unites like-minded lawmakers to push for limited government, a strong national defense, a thriving economy, and fiscal responsibility. Today's guest is the chairman of the RSC, and he is a seventh-generation Texan who grew up in San Angelo, where he learned the values of hard work, faith, and service from an early age. After high school, he earned an appointment to the U.S. Air Force Academy, where he trained to become a fighter pilot. He went on to serve 2 decades in the Air Force as a decorated combat veteran and national security expert. He's seen firsthand the threats America faces. Since taking office, he's been a strong voice for energy independence, securing the border, and protecting the freedoms that make this country great. I want to welcome Congressman August Pfluger, who represents Texas's 11th congressional district. Welcome, Congressman.
David, thank you. And thanks for the kind introduction. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, no, pleasure's ours. Well, I do want to say, when I realized you're from San Angelo, I have spent time in San Angelo, not everybody has, and I flew into the airport in San Angelo, and that is a very small airport.
Oh, it is, and I know it well. I fly in and out of there every single week, but it's, we're out there, but I'll tell you, a lot of people like it that way, but it's a small town, but just the greatest people you'll ever meet, hardworking patriots, those that believe in our country.
That is the truth. No, the people I know in San Angelo are God's people. They're really good folks, and true Texans at that. So you were in the Air Force. I'm just kind of curious, what kind of aircraft did you fly?
Yeah, it was. And I flew the F-15 and the F-22, had a chance to command, was really stationed all over the world, lots of different experiences on several different continents. And I think it shaped the way that I think about our country, the way that I think about our world, the way that I think about service to this country and how to protect the values that we hold so dear. I mean, that really, it was formative in my professional career, to have an opportunity. I mean, and how cool, that's what I wanted to do from the time I was 14 or 15 years old and actually had the opportunity to do it, which was just amazing. Everything else after that is just icing on the cake.
Well, as someone who came up during the Top Gun generation, I shared the same goal. You just happened to achieve it. So you're a better man than me, probably.
Well, luck and timing. We will all tell you that there were many lucky kinds of things that happened to us to get to that point, because we know there's a lot of people that were good enough that could have done it given better timing or other circumstances.
Yeah. So turn your time in Congress. You're the chairman of the Republican Study Committee. Can you just give our listeners an overview of what this Republican Study Committee does?
Well, you bet. And I like the way you introduced it, from 1973 to now. We're 52 plus years old. And it's an organization of 189 members, by the way, the largest it's ever been now. So 189 members that spread the geography of this great nation, that spread the ideological spectrum, that come from every different type of district and background. But the thing that unites us is a desire to get back to conservative roots. And that doesn't mean radical. That means small government, it means lower taxes, it means accountability, it means having fiscal discipline, which we haven't seen in decades in Washington, D.C. But it also means, and this is very important, it also means a willingness to come together to find a solution, knowing that, of course, we want all of it right now. But in any sort of system of governance, you don't really get to achieve that. So let's get a first down. And I think it's something Democrats and liberals have been willing to accept incremental gain. We have to be willing, and the Republican Study Committee is an agent of this change, we have to be willing to accept first downs, incremental wins, and claw back many of the harmful policies that have put our country into the situation it is now. And you're starting to see that. I'm really proud of what we're doing in the last 3 or 4 months, and the RSC has been at the core of all of that.
When I look back on the history of Congress, the recent history, I've been around it for 25, 30 years. A lot of the really great leaders, folks that I at least admire as a conservative, led the study committee and were active parts of it. And so I give you a lot of credit for kind of continuing that tradition. And it's a time where folks maybe aren't looking for those incremental wins, or maybe they're even just looking for headlines. And I kind of think that under your leadership, it seems like you're motivated by sticking to principles, but trying to move the ball down the field. What are some of the things that you're focused on in that regard?
Well, you're right. We are focused on moving the ball down the field and getting wins because we believe there was a mandate that was given in November. And I would start with a couple of things. I mean, border security, energy security, our economy, the health of our economy, extending the tax cuts. I know things that we'll probably talk about today. One thing that we get a chance to do in the RSC is we meet weekly while we're in D.C. when we're in session. Wednesdays at 12:30. And we have cabinet officials that are knocking down the door to come talk to us. They want to, bring their ideas, synchronize. The Senate is doing the same. We have a lot of communication and coordination with the Senate. And you can start to see the movement. When we had Chairman Arrington talk to us about how we're $36 trillion in debt and we need to move a reconciliation bill that will garner savings and bring our country back into a state of fiscal discipline. When we had Chairman Jason Smith come talk to us and explain just how important it was to extend the Trump tax cuts from 2017. These are the types of things that we are championing. These are the discussions that we're having. And we're pushing leadership, quite frankly, to act on these things. We know they want to do it, but we're going to hold them accountable on the timing and on the content of the legislation. Very proud of what RSC has been able to do just with the conversations and the dialogues we've had in 4 months.
Yeah, that's great. So you mentioned the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, or TCJA. They're set to expire at the end of this year. We've spent a lot of time talking about these, but for listeners who haven't heard of TCJA, can you just explain a little of the background on what they are and how they came about?
Well, what President Trump did that was so brilliant in his first term was he acknowledged the role of the tax code and how it would just unleash American innovation and competition here. And by doing the things that he did, by lowering the rates to allow companies to hire more people, by lowering the individual rates that would allow families to save more money and put more money into their pockets, by competing and saying, if you're going to bring your company back to the United States, we're not going to penalize you. We're going to give you credit for that. And there's a host of other things that were involved in really just unleashing what I think is our most competitive advantage, and that is innovation. So you're right. At the end of this year, those are set to expire, and that's unacceptable. So we have this situation where we have the House, the Senate, and the White House. And what we are doing, what the Republican Study Committee is championing and pushing, is to make sure that those are not, that they don't fail, that they don't see the end of their run, but that we actually extend them. We would love for them to be permanent. We need to garner the savings to offset some of the cost of those tax cuts. But what every business, what every entity, what every agency will tell you is that they want predictability and they want the planning timeline, which is why we are moving with such an aggressive path here in the House. We want to get the tax cuts extended, not in December, where it's too late to plan for the next year. We want to get it done in May or June, where every business, every individual, and every entity has the ability to plan for 2026 to really garner the benefits that the extension of those tax cuts would give all American companies, and especially the innovation side.
Yeah, we've been spending a lot of time here on this podcast talking to business owners or individuals who really have been impacted in a positive way by the tax cuts. And it's been fabulous to hear, we talked to Bob from Ohio, who owns a cell phone or a tower construction company in a really small town. And as a direct result of the tax cuts, he gave his employees up in 2018 a 40% raise, just straight up because of the tax cuts. That's what he told us. And then he was able to buy more equipment, some more vehicles, to help grow the business. And it's the largest employer in this part of rural Ohio. And I was just so happy to hear about like the direct impact that I think sometimes our opponents think it's just, people just, want the money and they put it in their 401k or they squirrel it away in some investment, that rich people have. And it's like, no, this is real businesses, real people who are benefiting. Conversely, if we don't see these reauthorized, it's a tax hike on American businesses and families.
There's a fundamental difference between what the Biden administration and Democrats want and what we as conservatives want. And they wanted to regulate everything. And they tried to regulate like the oil and gas business out of business. They want to use a heavy-handed approach and they want to regulate everything. Republicans want smart regulations, but we also want tax policy. And I'll give you a perfect example on the research and development tax credit. What Democrats would say is, yeah, sure, you'll get a tax credit for it, but you can't write that off in the first year. You're going to have to write it off in 5 or 10 consecutive years, that you don't really get the benefit of that. What Republicans are going to say is, if you show tangibly that you have put dollars into innovating, which helps us compete with China in telecommunications, which helps us compete with China in the defense industry, which helps us compete with China in the energy industry, if you can tangibly show that you are actually using research and development to spur on innovation, to further hire more people, then we're going to let you write that off in the first year, because we know you're going to reinvest in your company. You're going to reinvest in the United States of America. That's the real difference, is we want to unleash that potential, and what Democrats want to do is stifle it. And their policies have stifled it, and there's less investment under that heavy-handed, regulatory, burdensome approach that they take.
Well, and conversely, you've seen the Trump administration, come in like a breath of fresh air when it comes to regulation, and certainly where they're pushing on taxes. The risk of being off of TCJA briefly, I know that energy is, I'm sure it's super important to you and your district being West Texas, and to the Republican Study Committee. I was in Alaska a few weeks ago, and energy production is their core business, and they are, they're very excited to have the federal government be a partner in spurring energy production as opposed to their opponent. Now, they have the other things they got to clear out of the way, but they're very optimistic about like new projects coming online that'll produce hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil a day. And that's pretty transformational for that state and for the country.
Well, it really is. And, you started the podcast with a look back to 1973 and the Yom Kippur War. Well, remember at that time that we were not energy independent. We were not energy dominant. We were very dependent on OPEC for our own supply needs. Now, it's just the opposite. We have the resources. We should be using them. Not only are they safe, not only are they affordable and reliable, but they also give us that added layer of geopolitical security. And energy security really is national security. And by the way, we have to unleash and use every available resource, because we're going to see demand that goes through the roof. So that Alaska production that you're talking about is going to service demand because of the rise in electricity needs due to data centers and AI and all of the rest of the things that are coming around the world, we don't want to ship those over to China. Keep them here. Use our resources and unleash American energy.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We talked to the CEO of the nation's largest natural gas company, and then someone from Pennsylvania Coal, someone else from another coal organization, and everyone kept hitting on the exact point you just made. Like that, I don't know that the American people realize that data centers and AI are driving up the need for production so dramatically. And that's that if we can't deal with that, we're in big trouble, and that'll totally stifle innovation. Fortunately, I think that people are talking about it in the administration, and leaders like you are anticipating this and trying to unleash American energy.
Yep, that's true.
So going back to the Republican Study Committee, so when we're focused on something like TCJA, how does the committee make a difference and kind of organize itself to try to impact on these issues?
Well, we have 189 members, and we got experts that are members of Congress. We have experts that are on our staff. We have a variety of task forces, including a budget task force and a few others. And, not every person can be on every committee. And in fact, the Ways and Means Committee, which is the committee that will be responsible for extending the tax cuts, is only filled with maybe 25 Republicans. So you have to leverage the knowledge of those that are doing the business and educate the rest of the conference who has a vested interest that it succeeds, has thoughts on the tax code, but may not be in the room every single day. And that's just the way the committee process works. So the Republican Study Committee has pulled together some of the brightest minds in our conference. I already mentioned that we had Chairman Jason Smith come and talk to us and explain the priorities. We've also leveraged some of the administration and the leaders there to come and talk to us, whether it's through OMB or the Treasury, or a variety of experts that have been appointed by President Trump, cabinet officials that have been appointed and Senate confirmed, that we bring those together to come have a discussion. We use our task forces to then come up with what we think are some of the most important tenets and principles. And then we have a conversation with leadership to make sure that those are actually included in the bill, that we actually are going to extend the provision and the exemption on, say, the death tax, that we're not going to penalize American farmers and ranchers because that their family farms have been in their families for over 100 years and may look like they're worth a lot of money, but we all know that they can be land rich and cash poor. And just producing that crop for the next year is extremely hard. So we shouldn't penalize them when the father or the mother, the grandfather passes away and tries to pass that down. But that's exactly what Democrats want to do. So we're talking about those types of provisions every single day, trying to make common sense decisions and ensure that leadership is going to include the things that are important to us as conservatives in the final bill.
Well, with such an overwhelming number of members, your impact is certainly profound, I'm sure.
189 members it's great, but yes, you're right. And we have, it's a lot of members, but it's been great. I mean, people really have appreciated the conversations, I think, that we've had and to be able to open up and talk about a lot of things and educate. We have a great freshman class, but we need education to happen constantly.
Well, one of those freshmen is my former colleague and predecessor as the host of the American Potential podcast, Jeff Crank from Colorado, and I know he's a RSC member and was one of the early things that he wanted to jump in on.
Jeff's been doing a great job. He represents Colorado Springs, and we having gone to the Air Force Academy that is situated just west of Colorado Springs. I have a vested interest in that district as well, but he's doing a great job.
Yeah, very true. Very true. A beautiful district too, but we won't speak too highly of them though. Anyway, so just to put a bow on TCJA, if they were to expire, how do you think it would directly affect Americans?
I think the most important thing that we can do is give predictability, to let the American public know that this is important, that we want to pass this, but we want to make it permanent in every case that makes sense and where we can. That when Americans go to think about starting a business, when they go to think about planning for their future or their kids' future, they know and have certainty of the tax code that they can say, this is what I need to do because I know now it's not 3 or 4 years, it's 10 plus years that I'm going to have this provision that I can plan. I hope that answers your question. The risk of not doing it could be fatal to our economy because the tax rates will go back up drastically. Individual rates, corporate rates, the provisions that help us innovate, the R&D side of it that I mentioned, it could really be a fatal blow to our economy. And by the way, as a conservative, it's just not acceptable. We have to. There's no room for failure here, and that's why I'm optimistic. I feel very good that we will extend these, we will pass these, and we will see a tremendous amount of economic growth continue to happen.
Yeah, I'm optimistic too, and I'm so happy to hear you say that because you know a heck of a lot more than me. But we've had folks around the country kind of contacting their legislators, participating in events, trying to beat the drum as to why this is so important to families and businesses and just for America's economic future. Congressman, as you wrap up, I wanted to give you a chance to tell me I've been to your congressional district and it's massive. You have to have one of the largest landmass congressional districts, at least, just in America. But what are some of your favorite things, or why do you really like representing the 11th district in Texas?
Oh, what a great question. It is massive. It's 300 plus miles from east to west. But like I started out, it includes some of the hardest working, most patriotic, kindest people that you'll ever meet. People that just want to raise their families and do a good job. They don't need anything from the government. In fact, they really kind of want the government just to stay in charge of national defense and make sure that we're safe and have a strong border. I would say going west to east, I love the Permian Basin and the innovation that you see out of there. Yeah. The fact that, just about 10 to 15 years ago, the Permian Basin was producing less than 1 million barrels a day, and now they're producing 6 million barrels a day. And that's because of the shale revolution. It's because they figured it out. And they knew they had to figure it out, and it has made such a difference for our economy. A strong energy base and foundation is key to an economy and key to national security. So when you go out there and you see what the folks in Midland and Odessa are doing day in and day out, and the fact that they were assaulted by President Biden for 4 straight years, it warms your heart just to know how hardworking these people really are. You get into the Concho Valley in San Angelo, where my hometown is, and we've got a lot of agriculture. We have a military base, Goodfellow Air Force Base, that trains intel professionals that are on watch 365 days a year. And throughout the entire district, you've got a lot of farmers and ranchers that are producing crops and livestock and doing things that are hard, depending on the weather, and not easy in West Texas because we don't get a lot of rain. But whether it's in the far western side of the district or all the way to Killeen, Texas, where Fort Cavazos is, I think you can sum it up by saying we have decent people with great values that are so hardworking, and they're really, really patriotic and love this country. So it's easy for me to come to Washington, D.C. and represent them because they love this country so much, and that inspires me.
Well, I'm sure that Chairman Arrington or some of the members in Dallas or Houston would disagree with this assertion, but I have spent a fair amount of time in Texas, and I think your district is the most quintessentially Texas district area of the state that I could think of. When people envision Texas, they're thinking about your district.
Hey, I love it. I'm not going to disagree. In fact, I completely agree with you, and I'll tell Arrington and the rest of them myself.
They can come on the show and they can just debate it with me.
If they want to, that's where they need to go.
All right. That's great. Well, Congressman, I really appreciate you joining us and the time that you've taken. I appreciate your leadership on so many important issues as leader of the Republican Study Committee, and in particular on as we try to extend or make permanent the TCJA, the tax cuts. So really appreciate your time with us.
Well, thanks. Thank you for having me. Thanks for a great discussion on a topic that's near and dear to my heart, but also on one that my district just loves, which is talking about the work that they do. So thank you.
Thanks again. Well, if you like this episode and would like to stay connected with the podcast, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And always remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.